All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Dimes and Donuts podcast, your deep dive into the BAAD Owners Fantasy League. My name is Garrett.
And I'm Nick.
And today we have Week 9 action coming at you. We had some crazy dimes, some more unfortunate rockers donuts, and plenty of other things to get into. So let's start with the dimes. Take us away, Nick.
Well, before we hop into the dimes, let's hop into the trade of the week that happened.
If you want.
Irving Indica and the Dallas Clovers made a trade. It looks like Irving Indica's been making quite a few moves. They were also in the most recent trade with no Robbins. And in this trade, Irving Indica received T. Higgins and the Dallas Clovers 2024 fifth-round pick, with the Dallas Clovers receiving Russell Wilson and the no Robbins 2024 second-round pick. So that's kind of a interesting trade. I mean, those are two well-known players, right? Reasonably large-name players.
I personally really like this for the Irving Indica because I don't see how the Bengals are going to be able to re-sign T. Higgins, and he will be a number one receiver in, 25 other teams if he goes to the right one. So I think that's a long-term play there because he knows that this season probably not going to shape up right. Russell Wilson's been putting up some really good numbers compared to last year. So I get why the Clovers were going for that as well. And they get a second round pick for this year with that fifth second round pick swap. So it makes a lot of sense narratively for both teams, but I do think that long term, I guess depending on what No Robbins turned that second round pick into, Irving Indica made a really good move here.
I mean, yeah, I think that I actually completely agree with you in that both of these teams, it makes total sense, right? Because especially Dallas Clovers, I own their second round pick. So them taking that no Robbins second round pick gives them back a second round pick, which they kind of need because they're still in that rebuilding stage. Yep. They get Russell Wilson, which they need because they don't really have a quarterback outside of Bryce Young right now, who's been struggling a little bit in his first year, and kind of offloads the risk of T. Higgins to a team that can kind of take on that risk. Because you're talking about, T. Higgins, of course, he's an extremely talented wide receiver. Who knows what the situation that he's going to be put into for the next 4 years will be when his contract runs out. You just don't know that. And
you also wonder if
it's
going to be like an Antonio Brown, Juju Smith situation where if he does go somewhere else, right, he doesn't have that solid number one of Jamar Chase, taking away, their best corner option and taking away that side of the field. So we'll see. I do think that T. Higgins, though, is going to be fine anywhere he goes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because it could also turn into a DJ Moore situation in which he gets out of Panthers, goes to the Bears, which everyone was kind of bad situation, right? With Justin Fields completely popping off.
Or even look at AJ Brown with the Eagles. Right?
Yeah.
Now he is arguably I think he's the best receiver in the league this year, other than maybe Tyreek. And then Diggs, maybe numbers wise, but he's top 5 and you can't even argue it. So we'll see.
Yeah, I completely agree. It makes sense for both teams. I don't think we can say a winner or a loser on this one. I think it makes total sense.
Total sense. All right, cool. So let's go to the dimes. Dallas Clovers, avert your eyes because C.J. Stroud, 40.8 points. Dude put on an absolute clinic. This was his I'm an NFL star moment. Hopefully he keeps that up. I mean, I can't believe that everybody thought that this was going to be a huge rebuilding year for the Texans. They're sitting there at 4-4. And now, I cannot wait for the Bengals-Texans game on Sunday, which I did not circle as I need to watch this game, thing going forward. So, yeah, CJ Stroud's amazing.
I mean, yeah, and you say hopefully can keep it up. I mean, this is obviously a huge high, and most quarterbacks never hit this. But he's been doing great, you just kind of alluded to. I mean, clearly the best rookie quarterback out of the draft. The Cicadas with an absolute hit here. I mean, they took him 5th overall in the rookie draft, and it's starting to look like he maybe should have been the first overall pick.
No, he definitely should have been at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got 20-point weeks. Plenty. He hasn't really scored under 14, except for week 1, and it was his first game ever. So, yeah, coming out party, albeit against Tampa, who they have a lot of points scored on him, one of the worst defenses in the league right now. But, it's going to be interesting. His projected points have actually gone up every single week. And, yeah, the game against Cincinnati would be huge.
Absolutely.
Running back, we've got Shad White of the Trash Fires with 27 points. Interesting performance.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming. I don't know if you would have seen that coming. I mean, obviously Rashad White is a good fantasy running back, but
I mean, that game was just a shootout, right?
Surprising, yeah.
Yeah, plenty of receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, his yards per carry weren't very good, but he got the ball 20 times. So, he was given a lot of opportunities. So, yeah, I wasn't necessarily seeing it coming, but he is the 11th best running back in the league so far in terms of points.
It kind of reminds me of the Najee Harris situation, which that it's not necessarily that he was being extremely efficient, but there was just no one competing for touches, and so there you go. Good fantasy player to have.
Najee Harris always taking strays in this podcast.
Oh, man. Most overrated fantasy player in the last few years, in my opinion, but besides the point.
Why don't we talk about a rocker real quick? Tank Dell. I love Tank Dell.
Absolutely.
I have many picks at all, but with a 5th round pick last year in the draft, taking someone like Tank, who has a clear connection with CJ Stroud. They've talked about it. They seem to vibe. I don't care if he's 5'10", 160. He just puts up numbers. He, is a touchdown threat all the time. He's had 3 weeks over 20 points. This has been his best one, and he led the entire league as a wide receiver in his 9th game ever. So pretty good. 8th game ever, technically. So thank you, Tank. Hopefully you can keep producing. Next, we've got Dalton Schultz. After a change of scenery, looks like he's putting up 27 points for a tight end. That is massive.
Yeah, I mean, 11 targets, and then you come away with 10 receptions on those, one of which being is a receiving touchdown, 130 receiving yards as a tight end. I mean, whoa. What else are you really looking for? That Houston offense this whole past week just absolutely ate. When it rains, it pours. It explains why CJ Stroud, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz were putting up so many points. And like you did point out, the Buccaneers defense has been having some issues.
Noah Brown was their leading. That's crazy.
Right.
So they had everybody on the team was leading. Okay, cool. Next, we've got a defensive line. Max Crosby, 41 points. If anybody saw his pregame video, he didn't say it, but he did back up the play. He ended up with 3 sacks, which is not too crazy for him. He's done it multiple times in his career. But yeah, 41 points. He has been an absolute stud all year. Hasn't scored less than 13. He's had 3 games over 30 points. He's had multiple 20-point games. He's just been super, super effective and efficient.
And he put that up against the Giants, whose offensive line is basically just, what are those called? Turnstiles? The things in front of
when Daniel Jones, any quarterback for the Giants this year, like their numbers are so bad. It's just, awesome to see. Next, we've got Jawan Bentley of No Robins.
That's the linebacker of the week.
41 points. I have no idea who this guy is, but 41 points for a linebacker is incredible, especially when it's not like someone you probably had to, spend a lot of draft capital on.
I mean, the crazy thing about him is that when you look at his usage rate, he has insane snap percentages. I mean, he is always on the field, and I mean, we've beaten this into the ground so much. Snap percentage for defensive players is really the best indicator for overall performance outside of, obvious Hall of Fame.
There's also another one. I will say, just like we talked about Max Crosby, if you are on a really bad team, your offense is usually not on the field as much, and your defense has to put in so much time. And so if you're sitting there and you're getting like the Patriots, who have had multiple games and 3 to 30 or whatever, right? Your offense isn't on the field, and the other team is just throwing, running, doing whatever they can. So that ups your tackle numbers, that ups the percentage of time you're on the field. It increases everything.
That's a great point.
Yeah, taking a linebacker on a bad team, always good.
Assuming that they're not bad because the defense.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, a bad offensively team.
Yes, that's it. Okay, and then last, rounding out, we've got Kenny Moore of the TD11 Tudgays, as if the TD11 Tudgays needed more teammates to score more than 40 points. Just not fair.
That team is so stacked right now. I mean,
all my homies hate that team. he's been incredible this year. Like, if you look at Kenny Moore's numbers, this is his, third game over 25 points as a defensive back. I mean, the Colts have gotten themselves into a lot of shootouts. That'll make a lot of tackle opportunities for defensive backs. So, again, it makes sense. It's just still wild whenever you see anybody score more than 40 points, let alone a DB.
Well, he also was playing against Bryce Young and got 2 pick sixes, which surely helped.
Man, Bryce. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Dallas Clovers.
Dallas Clovers.
Sorry, Dallas Clovers. It hurts me every time.
Carolina.
I was so excited for them.
It stinks, man, because, it's not like he was going to any worse of a situation, compared to the Texans either. You can't even give him like that. I don't know. All right, anyway, let's go to the donuts. First up for the Irving Indica, we got Michael Thomas. He was 0 for 1. He was targeted once. Slant Boy had a 63% snap percentage. I think Michael Thomas might be cooked. I think he's cooked.
There's nothing Irving Indica could have done differently. I would have played him. Everyone would have played him. That's rough. Just a bad situation.
That's a tough one. Next, we've got Joshua Palmer of the Rockers. He was on IR. That was announced before, but obviously just a stupid move. Then we've got Quay Walker, the Clovers, also out. And then one of my best players, Zaire Franklin, right before the game started, went out as well. So those are your donuts.
2 Rockers donuts.
2 more Rockers donuts. Add it to the list. Doesn't matter, though, because we're about to get into matchups. All right, you go for it.
Yeah, so I'll lead off with my matchup this week against the Trash Fires. So playing on Nukes versus Trash Flyers. Yeah, not Flyers, Trash Fires. We were only able to put up 202.88 points, which at first, I mean, I kind of talked about this to you and the Trash Fires owner before the game, and I was kind of like, well, I have a rough bad, bye week. I have a bunch of players out. I'm not going to do good this week. I had a max points for this week of 325, so I just didn't do well. Like, I had a 62% efficiency rating. That was just bad management by me. So, Trash Fires absolutely ended up smoking me, and I took a double loss this week.
Yeah. Next, we've got another team that got absolutely smoked, even though their opponent put up 249.18 points. We have the Irving Indica and Point Break FC. Point Break FC with 178.94 points. That's hard to do.
Yeah, man, that hurts me. You'll remember at the start of the season, preseason, I really thought Point Break was going to be the dark horse playoff run
check the
candidate.
receipts on that Nukes take.
Yeah, that's wrong. It's disappointing. I really thought they were going to do pretty well this year, and it just hasn't been panning out like I'm sure they would have wanted it to. So,
yeah. So with a double loss there, Point Break has now lost 10 games in a row.
Oof.
Okay, cool. Now we've got the Atlanta Cicadas, who have been bouncing back against CD's Nuts. CD's Nuts put up 221 points. Atlanta Cicadas in the 300s at 301.9. Dominant win for the Cicadas. And one of their worst performances of the league from CD's Nuts. They've been playing really well this year.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, next we've got the Rockers and the Dallas Clovers. Classic Clovers performance, 185.62 points. Rockers are at 308.6. Good bounce back week for us. But yeah, Clovers, 9 losses in a row after a pretty solid start for them. We'll see if they can turn it around. But again, I mean, they do have a lot of good rookies aside from Bryce Young, producing. So, a couple more years, maybe even one more year of really good drafts could turn that around. And then last, we've got the TD11 Tudgays scoring 346.4 points against the No Robins at 287.38. It's just every week with the team, man. Like,
they're a scary team.
They're dominating every single week.
It's kind of crazy how consistent that team is. I mean, I think that at this point it's pretty clear, and we'll hop into it once we hop into the power rankings, of course, that they're they're a team to be feared. But what's also kind of interesting, I don't know if you noticed this. You notice how many blowouts there were this week?
A lot. It's because, again, half the league, I think it's just we're in bye week hell right now. So, a lot of teams are really, really suffering from that. So we're going to see some disparate matchup.
The closest match was that TD11 Tudgaze versus No Robbins game, which had a 59.56 point differential, and that was the closest game this week. 59.56 point differential.
I'm not going to look it up, but somebody at home should. I think that's probably the largest margin of victory to be the closest ever, because that's insane.
Yeah, I have no idea how I would validate that, but
yeah,
I think
the biggest
right.
blowout was almost 120 points.
Yeah.
Oh, what a crazy week. Okay, next we'll go into the standings. So, sitting atop, sole possession of first place, we have the TD11 Tudgaze 4-win streak. The No Robbins split this week. They're at 12-6, along with two other teams, the Plano Nukes, who just had a double loss, and then the Trash Fires with a double win this week. Then at 5-6, we've got CD's Nuts and then the Atlanta Cicadas. CD's Nuts at 11-7, Atlanta Cicadas at 10-8. We've got two teams at 6-12, the Castle Rock Rockers and the Irving Indica. And then all the way at the bottom, we've got two teams at 4-14, both on very long losing streaks, with Point Break at 9, and then the Dallas Clovers at 10, only separated by their points. So, here we go.
All right, so let's go ahead and hop into the power rankings. Do you want to take it from the top or the bottom this week?
I feel like being a top this week.
All right, this is a top start
It's a
this
top
week.
pod.
It's a top start this week.
Yeah,
so, obviously sitting at the number one power rank spot, the TD11 Tudgaze. I don't
never leaving.
see how you can ever doubt
It's the Wolf of Wall Street, man. They're not leaving. They're going to stay there.
I'd love for them to leave at some point soon.
I'm sure you would.
But, yeah.
It makes sense. The team is just absolutely crushing it. It's a good team. I don't have anything else to say about it.
I completely agree. But
we've got the Philadelphia Eagles, the No Robbins at 2. They're doing pretty well. I've got no problems with them either. Again, it sucks to lose this week when, you scored 287, which would have beaten just about everybody else except for 3 people. And you happen to go up against the TD11 Tudgaze. But yeah, with that head-to-head, that was easy there. Honestly, the Nukes could be switched for this spot as well.
Oh, I don't think so.
We just had a down week with buys, I think. But the two are pretty close, in my opinion. So Nukes are going to come in at 3rd. And then we're also going to keep CD's Nuts, despite scoring only 221 points this week against the Atlanta Cicadas, ahead of them at 4. So then we'll have the Atlanta Cicadas at 5. And then the Trash Fires drop down to 6. So the only switch this week for the top 6 of our playoff teams is going to be right at the bottom with 5 and 6 switching. Do you agree with that switch?
I think I agree with that switch, if for no other reason than the Atlanta Cicadas are having kind of a resurgence in a lot of the talent of their team. If that, for lack of a better way to say, I think a lot of their team is starting to hit a really good point.
Yeah. They've got a higher point score than the Trash Fires and CD's Nuts. I don't think it's fair to put them above CD's Nuts yet, but based on talent eval, I would put them above the Trash Fires. Right?
Yeah, and especially because, they're about to have a lot of players coming off their IR slot, which is just, and those are good players. That's which is going to just boost them up even more. They're about to be a pretty.
They're about to get Kyler Murray back, right?
Yeah, Kyler Murray. Drake London was missed last week. The whole Falcons stars have been kind of struggling a little bit, but that's a pretty good flex spot at the very least.
Like you said, that team is about to look very different, which scares me because that's really the only chance I have of getting back into the playoffs is catching up with that team. Do you want to go through the bottom 4?
Yeah, so at the bottom we have the Rockers in the 7th slot. I think that's fair. I think that if you asked anyone out of the bottom 4 teams, which is the most likely to end up clinching a playoff spot at this point, it'd probably be the Rockers. Followed up by the Irving Indica 8. And then in the 9th and 10th slots, we have the Dallas Clovers at 9 and Point Break at 10, which, based on last week's performance, both of them have performed very poorly. But I would agree with, because notably, and I don't know if you noticed this, I think it might have been the case last week, but I didn't check. But I was looking at it this week. The Dallas Clovers are officially no longer the projected first overall draft pick for next year.
I did not notice that. Is that just max points for difference?
Yep, it is now Point Break FC by 15 points.
You know, it's funny because for anybody else, that would be good news, I think, because it meant they were climbing back up, but we know they can't secure a playoff spot this year. So that could be really bad news, honestly.
It could be bad news for Point Break?
No, it could be bad news for Clovers.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean,
strategy has been tank. So if they can't even do that well, then that's not going to be good.
I think that in their credit, though, there are a few things that aren't the worst about it. For one thing, it does show that at the very least, their acquisitions from last year have helped a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think that you want to continuously be the first overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, I also think that look at the rookie draft picks of last year and where they got drafted and who's really hitting. You don't need the first overall pick to get the stud from the rookie draft, right? CJ Stroud went 5th, just as an example. And I think that second overall...
What I kept trying to tell everybody last year. It was like, nobody gets it right. NFL coaches, players, GMs, owners, like they get it wrong all the time. So, that playing out in our league. I mean, again, Bryce Young could become Peyton Manning 2.0. Peyton Manning's first couple years in the league were awful.
Very true.
Brett Favre sucked. He could be amazing. So I don't want to say it's already a bust, but yeah, it is crazy the things we tell ourselves trying to pick things. So yeah, it could be completely different, but yeah, again, just to go over our power rankings, I'm going to go through them in order from the top to the bottom. TD11 Sudgaze, No Robbins, Nukes, CD's Nuts, Atlanta Cicadas, the Trash Fires, the Rockers, the Irving Indica, the Dallas Clovers, and Point Break FC.
All right. Well, cool. I think that those are pretty awesome. Outside of what we already discussed, is there anything that you're really interested in seeing, or any big changes or swings that you think are going to happen in the next few weeks as we head into playoff season?
Again, I feel like we're pretty dug in except for the top. I want the top chaos to happen soon in terms of who's going to get those bye weeks, because it's so close.
Right.
So close. The 5th spot and the 1st spot are separated by 2 games, and then the 4th spot and the 1 spot. I mean, you have 2, 3, and 4 all at 12 and 6. So there are 3 teams that are really, really trying to get that second bye. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. And then, of course, at the middle, just seeing if anybody can, get into the playoffs from the bottom, because right now, I mean, that's already a 4-game swing. So that's going to be difficult. Matchup of the week, I think, to look at is going to be the Cicadas and the Rockers, because they do play each other. So if they can take double wins, then that could maybe, shrink that gap a bit, but we will see.
Very true. Very true. Well, I guess we'll just have to figure all that stuff out next week when we see what ends up happening between those, and see if, like you said, that gap between the top teams and the mid teams either gets smaller, I don't know how much smaller it could possibly get, or just increases even more.
Agreed.
Awesome.
Do you have anything to sign off with?
Well, in that case, yeah, so it has been absolutely awesome, but I have bad news for you.
What?
It is the end of the podcast. So, everyone, please remember to like and subscribe and comment. Garrett, do you have anything to sign off with after hearing that awful news?
Sure. Patrick Mahomes is system QB.